People don't like this question, but we have to ask it, is, would we expect this from a revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the all-knower, the all-wise? Will we expect this? The one who understands us, that he understands how relations work, marriage relations. He understands the nature of man and the nature of woman. And he gives this advice. So you can understand why there are scholars out there that, cannot accept this as the interpretation for adhribuhunna. And they have every right to not go with the classical opinion. Because the classical opinion actually is based on ijtihad. And it uses weak ahadith, not the strongest sunnah, which is that the Prophet ﷺ did not hit his wives when there was no shoes done, and he did not hit them. That sunnah is more authentic, but they used weaker sources, and it was in a time that was completely different to our time. And we believe that the Quran is a miracle for all times. It's relevant for all times, all places, all cultures. So we need to get an understanding of adhribuhunna that's consistent, not just with our time, with all times, and for it to be the best advice. So that's what I plan on doing, inshallah ta'ala. Now, the word daraba, what does it mean? And this is a problem, because we're thinking about this from a modern perspective, the way that daraba has been used. I mean, obviously, if you speak to any Arab and say, what does daraba mean? He'll say hit. This is the common, way it's used. But the question is, was this how the Quran used it? And linguistically, adhribuhunna, if we look at this construction, adhribuhunna, if we did interpret it to mean to strike, let's say we interpret it to mean to strike, we run into some issues, because then what happens is we have no choice but to use a weak hadith to interpret the Quran and to add details to the Quran. In other words, there was deficiency in the meaning given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It needed an outside source, which has a possibility of being wrong. It's not a strong hadith. And we're using this to interpret the Quran. So you see the problem with that. We're talking about the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you can understand why going down this path, there are big issues actually. Now, getting back to adhribuhunna, if we take the route that it means to hit, it literally says, hit them. That you, men, hit them. So, it doesn't mention anything what to use. So in other words, maybe it's saying to hit them with your hand. Maybe you can shove them, elbow them. So it opens all these meanings. Next, where do you hit the woman? It's not mentioned either. Now we go back to hadith. It says, you shouldn't strike the face, you shouldn't do this. But how about the other areas that are not mentioned? We don't know how to strike, where to strike, and the strength is actually based on ijtihad. The way they make ijtihad, that it has to be done in a certain way. That's not mentioned in the Quran either. So you see, all these aspects of adhribuhunna is missing. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran does not leave meanings in the air. If anything is omitted, there's a reason why it's omitted. Okay, so that's what I plan on, inshallah, speaking about. So going back to daraba. Daraba has a wider meaning. So all the instances of daraba in the Quran can be traced back to one particular meaning, which means it's a striking or a hitting which causes a change. Now that change could be physical, obviously, like the Bahr and the rock with Musa alayhi salam. For example, idrib bi'asaq al-bahra, for example, strike the sea. Another meaning is ضرب الله مثلا, so that Allah strikes a similitude for you. So what does that have to do with hitting? What you're doing is you're striking. It's an intellectual strike where you're trying to get somebody to change the way they think. So that's the change intellectually. Then we have, for example, humiliation and poverty has been struck on them. So this is a spiritual hitting. Now with daraba, it doesn't necessarily have to have a positive meaning or a negative meaning, like a bad meaning. It's not good or bad. It could even be neutral. So it depends on the context. And what I'm suggesting is وَاضْرِبُوهُنَّ. It's not actually bad for the woman. It's actually good for both the man and the woman. Because what's the reason for it? وَاضْرِبُوهُنَّ. And if they obey, it's obedience. It's rectifying the marriage. It's actually this darb that the man does is actually a positive darb. Doesn't have a negative meaning. So, وَاضْرِبُوهُنَّ, and I've explained this linguistically. This is what's known as al-mansub binaz al-khafid, which means that the maf'ul bihi, hunna, has been, it's joined straight to the verb because the harf jar has been omitted. And so, what happens is there's actually a harf jar estimated. And the question now is, which harf jar are we talking about? And what type of nushuz are we talking about? Because every nushuz will estimate a different harf jar that will be appropriate to solve that issue. Because some nushuz, good advice can't solve it. Keeping a distance from her in bed can't solve it. These are deep-seated issues, very major issues that require a major step. And that's what وَاضْرِبُوهُنَّ is. It's a major step. It's initiated by the man. It's to the woman, and it could involve the man as well. So that's another point. Is it doesn't mean it's just the woman that's being affected by it, but the man also. I'll explain, inshallah. So as an example, there are actually quite a few scholars in our time that say that وَاضْرِبُهُنَّ means al-ibti'ad wal-iftiraq, which means that you keep resistance away. That's the translation they have of وَاضْرِبُهُنَّ. And they derive that from the ayah that comes after it, right after, وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ شِقَاقَ بَيْنِهِمَا. And if you fear complete separation. So because that's joined to it, they say, well, it's the step before it. Okay, so that's one example of scholars saying that actually has the meaning of something different to physically hitting. And now, are they right? They have quite a bit of proof for it. And as I said, this miswak situation is an ijtihad. And although it's been a dominant opinion, there's no way that it can only be that. It makes no sense because we're saying that it's a redundant step. Well, a lot of scholars are saying it's redundant. We can't use a miswak. And even as I said, the wording, وَاضْرِبُوهُنَّ, It should say وَاضْرِبُهُنَّ بِالْمِسْوَاكِ ضَرْبًا غَيْرَ مُبَرِّحٍ. It doesn't say that. So it actually leaves it open. Now maybe hitting with a miswak back then was okay. I don't know. I haven't heard any situations where hitting somebody with a miswak rectified a deep-seated issue. I've never heard that. Historically, I've never heard that. Today, in our times, I would definitely not. It's impossible. I don't think any such situation exists. I could be wrong, but I've never come across this. I've asked so many people. It's just, I can't imagine that a siwak can solve major problems. Now, getting back, so the shoes of the woman is not specified. And so the darb, we need to understand what the shoes is before we understand what the darb that could solve that problem. And so there's a change. Whatever the shoes is, the darb will be different. And the problem is sometimes translators or interpreters, they interpret nishuz to mean one thing. There's actually a specific word for that thing that they're actually interpreting. Allah wouldn't use nishuz if He meant something specific. Okay, so getting back, so we have one of the meanings to separate completely. Not separate completely, but separate from your wife. Ibti'ad wal iftiraq. This can actually be estimated in وَاضْرِبُهُنَّ. If we take the harf jar, an, and we say وَاضْرِبُوا عَنْهُنَّ, then we could estimate that meaning. It means that you keep a distance away from her. In some situations, that is the best solution for particular issues. She might be really, angry. Let's say she's very angry. She doesn't want to see you, for example. You've actually done something. Not you, but the man's done something, which is, even in the Sharia, would be considered, like something pretty bad. And she's just, lost, from her anger. And she tells you, I want to see you. She's still in the house. She's not leaving completely. So what do you do in this situation? You leave her. Now that's nishuz from her because of the man. So it doesn't mean, and nishuz from a woman doesn't necessarily have to be from her only. It could be from the man as well. So you need to realize these things. Some situations, no, it's from the woman, and the man keeps his distance away. And sometimes that could be a way to get her to come back to obedience. If a man, for example, had enough and he said, you know what, things have to change. If they don't change, I really can't handle this situation. So, and you keep a distance away. That might cause fear inside her, that distance, and then make her return back. As an example, I'm just giving some scenarios here. Let's say now we have nishuz where both the man and the woman are having issues with it. They're both having issues. They're very stressed out. They're falling apart, between each other from the stress, from life in general. And maybe if kids are involved, then they get affected by it. So it's from the man and the woman. And the man notices his wife, for example, so in certain aspects of the marriage, which is not fulfilling her duties. And he might not be fulfilling her duties either. But the man, he realizes a stage where he has to come in and act, for example. Let's say the woman's not acting. She should act, but if she's not, the man has to take the responsibility and say, you know what, I have to admit, we have a problem. I want to resolve the issue, and I've booked, us to go to counseling. That's coming from the man. Now, could that be estimated in the ayah? It could be estimated in the ayah. If we actually estimate the harf jar that's omitted to be the lam. So, وَاضْرِبُوا لَهُنَّ. In other words, be an example for her. Be an example in the sense that he realized there was an issue and took steps to admit to it and to seek help. So that's an example of وَاضْرِبُوا لَهُنَّ, for example. There's also, for example, وَاضْرِبُوا فِيهِنَّ, inside them as well. That's more a psychological step. Maybe making her feel a certain way where she needs to. Maybe she feels like she's not, appreciating her. And her nushuz is based on that. Okay, so as I said, the nushuz of the woman does not have to be necessarily just the woman's fault. This is something that we've kind of just, we simplify the ayat in the Quran, but we need to look at it holistically. And so you realize what's happening is that the nushuz interprets the harf jar that's actually omitted. We have, for example, another one, وَاضْرِبُوا عَلَيْهِنَّ. And what's ala? It's harf isti'la, so it means that where the man is in a dominant position. In other words, he's exercising his authority upon her. Now, exercising his authority doesn't mean going around and just, oppressing her. No, exercising authority to solve an issue. How does he do that, for example? As an example, let's talk about it. A man, for example, has had enough, and he says, you know what? I'm going to give you one talaq, pronouncement of divorce. So, I've had enough, and so he exercises his authority. So that's وَاضْرِبُوا عَلَيْهِنَّ as an example, and that would cause alarm bells going off for women. This will be a big shock for her, and very likely, if she wants to save the marriage, she will work to save that marriage and start obeying her husband. For example, a violent woman. Such women exist. They're very violent. They just get a bit upset. They start throwing things, even attacking the husband. There are people like that. So what does a man do in this case? He can be physical with her in that case. وَاضْرِبُوا عَلَيْهِنَّ. In other words, that wouldn't mean you go and hit her back. No, that would mean to subdue her. Even calm her down. Take her to therapy. فَاضْرِبْ فِيهِنَّ as well. So even more than one course of action. Some issues require more than one course of action. Okay? So you see the huruf jar that can be used in this section. It reflects what the nushuz is. And this is perfectly in line with the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That the solutions are what we understand based on our times. And it's the man actually that takes the role, that should take the role. Any nushuz that happens from the woman, and the first thing he should say is it my fault? That's the first thing he should try to find out. Am I the cause of her nushuz? And this is why we have the first step, فَعِظُهُنَّ. And women are not going to, if you talk to them, they're not going to, leave things inside like the way we do as men. They'll let it all out for us. That was about وَاضْرِبُوهُنَّ فَإِنْ أَطَعْنَكُمْ, and if they obey. فَلَا تَبْغُوا عَلَيْهِنَّ سَبِيلًا. Don't take a path against them. Don't start reminding them, oh, you did this before. Why did you do it? No. You act like it didn't even happen. وصلى الله على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Okay, so we've gone through the linguistics And we know now that وَاضْرِبُوهُنَّ has something estimated in it. It's a harf jar coming between the fi'l amr and the maf'ul. Every nushuz is dealt with differently. And it's something that what we should do is go to experts in the field of how to deal with these issues. This is the point. And who initiates this? Who initiates resolution to problems? It's both the man and the woman, because the woman is told also, وَإِنْ إِمْرَأَةٌ خَافَتْ مِنْ بَعْلِهَا نُشُوزًا أَوْ إِعْرَاضًا. And this actually goes in line with the ayah we're speaking about now. وَهْجُرُوهُنَّ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ is a type of i'rad. And so if the woman feels this, that the man's distancing himself, she would act and try to resolve the issue. So both of those ayat about the nushuz of the man and the nushuz of the woman work hand in hand. A very important point is that, and Allah alludes to it because there's an ayah talking about the nushuz of a man. So many times, actually, the nushuz of the wife is a result of the nushuz of the man. The man has done something, and maybe it's been going on for a long time, and the woman's just, fed up. She's had enough. And she just, does something completely out of character. So men have to be, the first step of the procedure to resolve the issue is فَعِظُهُنَّ. And for the woman, it's to bring sulh, islah, is to rectify the situation. So the communication is the most important thing in all of this. And both the man and the woman have to communicate their thoughts to each other. Women have no problem communicating. It's the man usually that has the problem. And they have to be listening to their wives and to try to change. If there's something that, they're doing something wrong, they need to change this. And so the point of all this is that the nushuz that the woman does, every nushuz has a different solution. And the solution is in the darb. Because the first two steps, and there's no order. So sometimes the darb is the only step to solve the issue. If we have, for example, a woman, she's had a lot of trauma in her life, speaking to her and separating from bed is not the solution. She needs psychiatry. She needs, counseling. The point is to solve the issue. And the vow gives a choice on which one to choose. There's no order. The vow doesn't mean order. Some scholars have said you go through those steps, but there's no order to it. And one point also, why does this darb? Because whenever you hear somebody speaking about adhribuhunna, it's always a negative darb. It has a negative meaning. But the point of it is, فَإِنْ أَطَعْنَكُمْ, if they obey you. So that's the point of it. So if it causes the woman to obey and the marriage issue gets resolved, that's a positive step. Why make it negative? Now, the opinions I'm sharing are opinions by many scholars. All I've done is I've actually joined them together and linguistically shown how it's possible to have those meanings in the ayah. So this thing about the siwak, it doesn't fit in to the context in our times. I'm not sure about previously, but this idea, in my opinion, it should not even be in our books. وَاضْرِبُهُنَّ is just a step to resolution. And it's a step where the other steps were not able to resolve the issue. And so وَاضْرِبُهُنَّ could be in a number of ways, as I said. فَإِنْ أَطَعْنَكُمْ فَلَا تَبْغُوا عَلَيْهِنَّ سَبِيلًا. And if they obey, do not seek a means against them. If they were doing something wrong and the problem is resolved, that's it. Pretend like it didn't happen. إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَلِيًّا كَبِيرًا. is the highest, and his kabir, the greatest. So this is the point of all this, is that everything is done in a marriage when it comes to our rights, our responsibilities, when issues happen, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one in authority. He's the one that we should be following, his guidance. And this is the best guidance that's mentioned in this ayah. Okay, wa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.